Warning, the following video contains spoilers. If you don't want this episode spoiled for you, switch the video off now.
The Timeshift.
Today is the day after Palindrome Day, so I suppose you could say we are beyond Palindrome. Okay, so before we get too far into this week's review of Doctor Who, I want to know what you thought about this week's episode of Doctor Who. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of next week's video. And be sure to like, favourite and subscribe to the channel for more Doctor Who-y goodness. Hooray! Support your local content creator today. It does them a power of good. Okay, so let's get on to the actual review itself. Now, before this episode began, I saw that Chris Chibnall co-wrote it, and I thought, ooh, does that mean this is going to be another big one? Does this mean this is going to be another story that's going to help develop our mystery surrounding Ruth and the whole
Timeless Child
stuff? And it turns out, no! So, bang goes my theory from last week's episode in terms of the whole writing credit stuff, but whatever, that's a whole other matter. And as for this week's episode itself, you know, I can't hate it because whilst this episode is nowhere near as interesting as last week's episode, make of that what you will, it certainly wasn't bad. I mean, it was a competent and serviceable episode as ever there was one. And of course, if I am to be honest with you, and I am not the only one that has said this, this episode certainly does feel like Orphan 55, but done right. It's not done perfectly, but it's still done better. It delivers its core message effectively without it feeling too preachy. And if I'm going to be honest with you, it honestly does at certain points feel like it's using plastic pollution more as a kick-off point more than a moral point, but whatever. I care a lot more for the characters that are introduced into this episode than I did with Orphan 55. More on that in a moment, and the story itself feels as though it's constantly moving forward with purpose and focus, as though it actually has an end goal in mind which is more than just ranting at the audience. Even if, much like Orphan 55, it does feel like it's trying to cram a lot into it. And that's not to say that I feel as though this should have been a two-parter as well, but it still feels like there's certain elements of this that you could have done with cutting and removing and maybe compacting a little bit, but, you know, that's a whole other matter. Like I said previously, I really like the characters that were introduced into this week's episode, though if I'm being perfectly honest with you, dear listener, I liked them a lot more than our usual companions. This is a sensation that no Doctor Who fan should ever really be feeling, but I'm feeling it. I've been feeling it for most of this season whenever we got an interesting side character introduced. This season, the companions have just been in this very weird place for me. They don't seem to be doing much, and that goes beyond the literal just giving them stuff to do. Last season you had Graham and Ryan with their character arc, getting over the death of Ryan's grandmother. Last season, Yaz was just there. This time around, they are all just there. No one really seems to be growing or developing. A lot of the smaller interpersonal drama stuff which we had quite so frequently in last year's series is just gone now. It's just barely here. Sure, you get it here now and then when you got the companions worried about the mental state of the Doctor, but it's not really there frequently. It's only ever introduced in a way which makes it feel like an afterthought, as though if Chibnall just added it in there for the sake of developing the overarching mystery, as though it is the equivalent of just having computer screens with The Promised Land or Torchwood in the background. It doesn't really show as though the characters themselves are growing or developing, and this particularly agitating as supposedly this season was supposed to be the season where Yaz got more stuff to do, when she hasn't. Whilst on the one hand I am glad there is less small interpersonal drama moments because it means more sci-fi action, on the other hand it's bad because it means our companions just kind of feel rather empty. Sure, I'll take sci-fi action stuff over our characters just sitting around a kitchen table talking about their feelings, as though it felt so much of last season was, but still the fact of though I'm sat here wishing that we had different companions, wishing that Jake especially was a new companion. I mean, within his first 5 minutes I'd already devised a whole character arc for him that would have taken him over his next year and a half with the Doctor. But no, he wasn't companion. He's just the episode companion, and off he trotted, off he disappeared at the end of the episode. And here we are, just stuck with the three amigos, not really doing much in an episode which had so many companions. Even our companions had companions. I mean, oh my word. Look, let's just dive now into the overview and just give my overall feelings of the episode itself. Okay, so now the overview. What do you think about the episode as a whole? And as a whole, I have to say that whilst it's not the best, brightest, most brilliantest episode of Doctor Who ever, it certainly wasn't the worst, and is definitely not the worst episode this season. I feel that in the end, this will be one of the many forgotten episodes of Doctor Who, as there always seems to be at least one per season. It does the job perfectly well, providing us with a fun little adventure, though it doesn't really do much to develop anything. It doesn't really develop the overarching mystery of the season, and it certainly doesn't develop our characters, certainly not our companions. Our companions, once again, just feel as though they're just there. They're not growing, they're not developing, they're not evolving. They just kind of seem to be stuck on pause. They feel as though they're falling into the trap of many companions where they're just kind of there to have exposition delivered to them. And it's made all the more compounding as certain performances just don't feel as though they're up to snuff anymore. Bradley Walsh just still feels kind of AFK. He was better in this episode, but it feels as though they're more writing Bradley Walsh's character as being Bradley Walsh, rather than writing Graham as being Graham. Mandip Gill continues to do her absolute damnedest with the character and the material that she's given, though she isn't given much. And as for Toshin Cole as Ryan, with all due respect to him, I don't think that he's cut out for a show like this. Though to be fair, I'm not sure these companions are going to be around for the next season, so we'll all see where that goes. You know, this was an episode that I was certain was going to introduce the Black Guardian because, you know, crows and stuff, but in the end he wasn't. And I do know that a lot of fans that feel rather disappointing that this wasn't the episode that reintroduced the Sea Devils into thing, because yeah, as much as I'm not disappointed, it would have really made for an interesting episode had they been reintroduced to it. Probably made for a far more interesting episode of Doctor Who had it had the Sea Devils being the bad guys in it, but for whatever reason in this year's series, this run of Doctor Who, we don't really seem to have bad guys. We have ambiguity, we have shades of grey, which on the one hand, sure, interesting, but on the other hand, yeah, can't we just have a moustache twirling villain that isn't the Master for once? But whatever. What did you think about this week's episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you shortly, either directed in the comments themselves or towards the end of next week's video. Thank you for listening, and goodbye!